Welcome to This Explainer. You know, whether we realize it or not, every single thing we know about the wider world comes to us through a specific lens. Today, we're going to dive right into the immense power of the mass media and how understanding its anatomy is absolutely crucial to making sense of modern society.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to map out the core functions of mass media, trace how the press actually evolved over time, unpack the massive digital media revolution, dig into media ownership and consolidation, and finally, look at the rules for regulating a free press. Let's get right into it.
All right, part one, the functions of mass media.
The stakes here have literally always been sky high. Thomas Jefferson firmly believed that a free press was an absolute, non-negotiable necessity for a healthy democracy. It's meant to be an independent check on power, and that concept is baked right into the DNA of the American political system.
So what exactly is mass media? Well, at its core, it's the collection of all the platforms that communicate information to the general public. We're talking television, print, radio, and obviously the internet. And the goal is to cover events concisely and neutrally. That neutral delivery is what separates it from public relations, which is paid communication designed specifically to make a person or an organization look good.
So what do these platforms actually do for us? They execute a few absolutely vital functions. They act as a watchdog to keep public officials accountable. They promote public debate, and they improve our overall awareness of complex issues. But maybe the most powerful thing they do is agenda setting. They literally determine what issues actually capture our attention on any given day.
And that agenda setting carries a massive moral responsibility. CNN's Christiana Amanpour has pointed out that ignoring major events, like the 1994 Rwanda genocide, in favor of other news has very real, tragic consequences. Words and the choice of which stories to tell matter deeply because they directly drive public compassion and government action.
Moving right along to part two, the evolution of the press.
Tracing this journey chronologically, it's wild to see the shift in speed. We started with the slow, deliberate pace of the early print era. The first continuous print press was in Boston back in 1704. Then, the 1830s brought the penny press, which made mass-produced news affordable. But the real leaps in speed and intimacy, those hit with the radio in the 1930s and television in the 1950s.
Radio brought an unprecedented level of intimacy to the whole country. President Franklin D. Roosevelt realized this and used his radio fireside chats to completely bypass print media. He was able to speak directly to a panicked nation as an equal, sitting right there in their living rooms. It totally transformed how leaders could comfort and persuade the public. Then television took that emotional power and cranked it up to 11. You can see the evolution here, going from the mass-produced text of Benjamin Day's penny press to the sheer visual impact of live broadcasts. Presidents like Bill Clinton after the Oklahoma City bombing or George W. Bush after 9/11 could broadcast their empathy live, instantly rallying the entire country during a crisis.
Okay, part three, the digital media revolution.
Now, the digital revolution we're living through is heavily defined by generational habits. While baby boomers are still relying pretty heavily on TV, there's been a stark pivot. Millennials and Gen Z rely massively on digital sources and social media. This completely changes where the public conversation is actually taking place today.
And here's the real game changer, the rise of the citizen journalist. Everyday people armed with smartphones can now capture pivotal political moments on their own. Think about Mitt Romney's 47% comment or Donald Trump's Access Hollywood tape. Those were captured and shared instantly, totally bypassing traditional media gatekeepers and flipping election narratives overnight. Alongside that, we've seen a massive explosion of what's called soft news. Shows like The Daily Show or The Colbert Report, like you see here with Stephen Colbert interviewing General Ray Odierno in Iraq. They use humor to painlessly introduce younger audiences to incredibly complex political realities. It's a highly engaging alternative, and research shows it actually leaves viewers surprisingly well-informed.
Which brings us to part four, media ownership and consolidation.
So, while the sheer number of platforms has exploded, corporate ownership has gone in the exact opposite direction. Over the last 4 decades, there has been a dramatic and, frankly, terrifying consolidation of corporate power at the very top of the media ecosystem.
Just to put the sheer scale of this monopoly into perspective, in 1983, 50 different companies owned 90% of U.S. media. By 2021, just 4 massive conglomerates control almost everything we watch, read, and listen to. We're talking giants like Comcast, Disney, Viacom CBS, and Warner Bros. Discovery running the whole shebang.
Which obviously brings up a huge, structural concern. Is it possible that these corporate conglomerates now control the flow of information to a degree where making a profit simply matters more than the impartial delivery of news? Take a second and think about your own news feeds right now. Could this consolidated ownership be actively limiting the viewpoints you're exposed to?
Finally, Part 5, Regulating the Free Press. We all know the First Amendment fiercely protects the press, right? But that freedom isn't totally absolute. Media outlets can absolutely be sued if they maliciously present false information as fact. Specifically, slander is speaking false information with an intent to harm, while libel is printing it. The press really has to walk a fine line between reporting hard facts and stating opinions.
The government can also step in when it comes to classified intelligence. A prime example of this was when Fox News reporter Geraldo Rivera literally drew his military unit's location in the sand on live television in Iraq. He was promptly escorted out because it compromised their safety. While prior restraint by the government is incredibly rare, national security is a major exception.
So who acts as the referee for all of this? That would be the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. They oversee broadcast television and radio, they enforce ownership limits, they manage the equal time rule for political candidates, and they enforce indecency regulations to keep public airwaves free of obscenity.
And they take that equal time rule incredibly seriously to maintain fairness. For example, if a station gives 5 minutes of free airtime to one candidate for an infomercial, or even if a candidate just pops up in a late-night comedy sketch, that station legally has to honor requests from all the other candidates in that race for the exact same amount of time.
Which brings us to our final thought today. Does the modern, highly consolidated, algorithm-driven media still serve its original democratic purpose as the ultimate watchdog? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question. In an era of infinite digital feeds and massive corporate monopolies, who truly controls the truth you consume every single day? Stay curious, keep questioning, and thank you for joining me for this breakdown of the U.S. media ecosystem.